to Hit the Reset. Our guest today is Anuranjita Kumar, a former HR leader at the various MNCs who swapped corporate life for entrepreneurship. She's now on a mission to teach tech to women and close the digital skills gap. Her two best-selling books, Can I Have It All? And Color Matters, demonstrates her wide-reaching influence in empowering professionals globally. We'll be talking about what it really takes to pivot, why midlife can feel like an identity earthquake, do women have it tougher at the workplace as we age, and how to turn that into a powerful opportunity. Anuranjita, welcome to Hit the Reset. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Malu. Always a pleasure to be with you, and absolutely privileged to be able to share my journey. And if it helps anyone,
Thank you.
I think
I'm
it's
going to start with an icebreaker with you. Okay.
sure,
You
sure.
had a stellar HR career in MNCs. If your first career was a movie, what would the title be and why?
Okay, very interesting. One of my favorite ones, which I think epitomizes, the journey would be Zindagi Na Mile Dobara. Okay, you only live once, and which is how I kind of relate my second act of entrepreneurship, which mirrors the freedom, courage, and the transformation in the film.
Wow, that was fabulously put. So now, what made you pivot? What was the very first seed that made you think that you need to pivot and do something different? And how did you get started with the whole thing?
So I think the first seed was actually planted when I was in Europe and while working with Citi when we were going through the financial crisis, where most banks and financial services were almost pulseless. I think when you go through an experience like that, when you're onboarded on or trying to turn the Titanic in many ways, you learn that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I think I learned the fact that, failures are very defining and experimentation is key and you have to keep trying new things to grow. And so the first seed was planted then. And it was one of those quiet moments when I literally looked out of my cabin in Canary Wharf and said, am I still growing or am I just going? And, I think the financial crisis taught me the tenacity of going. And having been at the peak of my career, doing another role back in India, as you're well aware, there was something more which was searching. But that was really the moment I felt that I could jump and do anything. And even if I fall, I can get up again and restart. But that's where the seed were sowed in many ways.
That's kind of tough, right? Especially when you're talking about an office in Canary Wharf and then saying, I'm giving it all up to start something. That was definitely a bold leap. So, what surprised you most about becoming a founder after so many years in the corporate life?
I think in many ways our brain is very selective. It tends to remember happy memories, and I loved the time that I spent with PNG, Citi, NatWest. But look, when we were all back there in the corporate world, encourages obedience to a certain way of being, to a certain way of working, and there's nothing wrong with it because if they don't do that, there will be anarchy in many ways. But I think in that you have to mesh your own individuality with what the corporate philosophy is, and putting on my HR hat, Malu, it is about hiring employees where that mesh could happen very easily. And I think somewhere we all mesh in about 50 to 60%, but there is that 40% live and kicking mind or feelings of yours which are almost surging out. And I remember that when I was actually moving on to becoming an entrepreneur, I was scared. It wasn't an easy decision. You had a job and you have payroll, you have money coming in every month, you have 100 people working for you, you have a snazzy office, you have a secretary, you have a car. And then to think, hey, I want to start Greenfield. It wasn't an easy decision. It took me about 18 months. Why wasn't it easy? Because I was like, how do I give it up? And what if I do something and it doesn't work? Then I would have actually put all this at risk.
Yeah.
Till one of the mentors when I was talking to, and he said, hey, what's holding you back? And I said, what if it doesn't work? And he turned around and said, what if it does? Right? And that was like a pivotal moment for me, that if it does, the upside is so high. And if it doesn't, I go back and find myself a similar job again. Maybe I'll get paid 25% less. Maybe I'll have a smaller job. But after 28 years of experience, I'll hopefully find something. So it was literally that I would say that pivotal question about what will happen, and how, if it doesn't work, you can go back, and if it works, the upside is so high. That kind of liberated me. And I thought of the years of corporate experience in somewhere had prepared me, but it hadn't. In corporate life, you have structure, you have systems, you have teams. As a founder, you have one thing, which is self belief. And some days that's all you have, because odds are not in your favor. I mean, if you do research, Malu, you will know that 95% of the startups fail. Okay.
True.
Some because of want of funding, some because of lack of support, some because the visioning is incorrect. So you have to be a little cuckoo to go into something where the odds are really against you. But it's a bit like a roller coaster. When you go to a Disney World and you get on a roller coaster, it'll be exhilarating, it'll be fun. And I think now I'm tremendously enjoying the ride. So I think, in some way, I had to unlearn control in a corporate world to relearn courage. In the corporate world, you delegate. As an entrepreneur, you do a lot by yourself. In corporates, people respect your title. In startups, they only respect your hustle and your vision. So I think what surprised me most was the fact that I was reborn and I was feeling like a 21-year-old trying to figure my way out, and how there are no rules, working without rules, how the fact that you can give yourself the freedom to create anything, everything. Your vision is as large as you can think. And that was a new aspect of working for me.
Yeah. That theme seems to flow through most people that I speak to about.
Sorry, and I must add, Malu, the fact that you don't have another headquarter in New York or London to go for a visit was super liberating.
Yeah, so the theme of unlearning, especially if you've had a lot of big corporate career and then you switch, there's a lot of unlearning and then relearning. So that is a theme that flows through. So in your case, how much time did you give yourself to say, if it doesn't work, I go back?
I put myself about 24 months
Okay.
from the time I get started. So in 12 months, I raised some money. It wasn't easy because it was COVID time. And I said, I will give it 24 months to
Yeah.
test myself. But, in a lifespan of, let's say, 75, 80 years, you are allowed to give 2 years to yourself to see what can work, what's not. So I put 24 months, and I have to tell you, there were lots of lonely moments where I questioned myself if this was the right thing I did. I gave up all that. And then there were exhilarating moments where that first client would come and say, hey, we really believe in this vision. Then there would be an investor who will reject our pitch deck because I don't know how you guys are going to scale. Another investor would say, hey, I'm not sure, whether you're a late entrepreneur, you're getting into your 40s or 50s, how much runway do you have? So there were down moments, there were up moments. But I think, we just kept going and, kept powering ourselves up. But 24 months was my timeline. In 23, we pivoted, and we pivoted to enable ourselves through technology, which is where the scale came in. And we were able to reflect and say, hey, amongst the things that we're doing, this works, and this I need to not do. So I think in a journey like this, it's very important to understand what you shouldn't do, not just what you want to do. And once we sharpened our strategy in 23, I don't think we've ever looked back. And I don't think I'm ever going back.
So, what was the one thing that you missed when you moved into your new role? And what is the one biggest hurdle that you had during your pivot? And also share how you recovered from that hurdle as well.
So I think the one thing I missed is that you can't just turn around and saying it's not my problem, right? So and so is not doing it, and so is not doing. No, the good is yours and the bad is yours. So I think sometimes the fact that you had people to talk to in an office, right? In the early days. Right now, I have about a big team who kind of are similar to me. But coming from Citi or big companies like NatWest, Citi, or PNG, there's a certain quality of environment that you work with. There's a certain talents that you work with.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, you hustle for talent, right? So in my early days, I literally hired people on love and fresh air because I had no money to literally meet payroll. So I would just say, hey, take a bet on me, because here is my vision. I'm building this Taj Mahal in 7 years from now. but the journey starts today. Would you like to be? So I think people bought into the vision when they came to work with me. It wasn't as easy to hire because when you're working with big companies, the brand stands behind you, right? And that fact that you had the power of the brand was missed in the initial days, because to attract talent, to attract capital, you need that. So I had to build the vision and the brand myself, and it took me some time to do. Yeah, so I think in some way it's
Yeah.
mirroring. What I missed was the quality of people that I worked with, and the hurdle was the kind of talent I needed to hire. I think it's a really important aspect for any entrepreneur to get the right people in the right job. So that was my biggest hurdle. If I had the right people in the right job, it will happen like this. To hire talent, you need the right mindset, not just give out money and salaries and saying, hey, come and work for me. I don't think that works. You need people who have the founder's mindset. And I think I made my fair share of mistakes. I won't say it was a hurdle, but was the biggest challenge that I was faced with.
Okay. I thought that would be the biggest advantage you have being from a HR role.
No, but to attract people to come and work. I mean, a lot of people will come and work with me, but the challenge is, if somebody's getting paid 1 crore and I can't pay them that, how do you yet convince them to come and work with the same quality and gusto?
Yeah.
And that is a big hurdle. Right? So unless people are in a founder mindset and not an employee mindset,
Yeah.
it's a transition one had to make for hiring people. So I think in entrepreneurship, you probably may not always get A players. You may get B players, which are good enough. But then you want to make B players work like A players. And that is the challenge which you have to be up to it. You cannot lose patience coming from a corporate, working with Ivy League people and saying, hey, why don't you understand this Canva PPT has to work like that? No, they don't. They don't come from that pedigree. They don't understand. So being patient,
Yeah.
being able to get the best out of your team, irrespective of their pedigree, I would say was one big achievement and rather than a hurdle over a period of time.
So in this role, I'd put it as new role. I think it's not new anymore. The entrepreneurial, mission-driven role. How do you think about purpose versus profit? Has that changed over from your corporate days? How do you put that in perspective? It used to be completely different in the corporate space, so you had to pivot again, right?
Yeah, see, I think as an entrepreneur, you are really driving purpose. Where I talked about the fact that when you enter this journey, it's a lot about self-belief. It's a mission impossible journey. So you say, oh, I believe in a coaching and a mentoring platform, and I believe this can happen because I have experienced it. But there is no test case for these things. So it is very, very purpose driven. Profit comes later when you have VCs or private equities who, for all the right reasons, will want you to exit and make sure they get the returns. But any founder who's listening to it, or who's kind of believed in a purpose, is the one who can get things started. So I don't think any founder will start and saying, hey, you know what, I want to make 5x or 10x and I want to be a billionaire. I don't think any founder that I know who's successful started with saying, I want to be a billionaire, so I will do this. They start with a purpose, and if there's a good product market fit, money will come. That is how mindsets have to be. So that is one of the biggest shifts in mindsets which people need to make. And in my corporate career, purpose often sat neatly in the vision statements.
Yes.
As you are well aware, framed on walls, spoken in offsites, and sometimes revisited in strategy sessions, right?
Yeah.
Because you're such a well-oiled machinery, I'm not saying they don't believe in the purpose, but it's a very well-oiled machinery. But the daily rhythm in big companies is revolving around targets, metrics, quarterly results. So control takes over sometimes the service. Purpose was the why that looked good, okay? Profit was the what that drove decisions. And that is true for most big companies, right? Because you're a listed company, you have shareholders, you have investors who are looking for returns. I'm not saying any company knowingly is driving down on purpose, but the reality is profit matters equally. In an entrepreneurial journey, purpose is 70% or 80 or 90% of what you do, right? And if you don't get that right, you will never see sight of any money, even in the short term or the long term. So when I became a founder, that equation flipped. And suddenly purpose wasn't a statement, it was survival. Every day I had to ask myself, why does this matter enough for me to wake up and fight for it again tomorrow, right? At VA's, purpose isn't just a slide narrative, it is the engine. And it is how I hired people, going back to the talent discussion. I'm building this Taj Mahal. That is the purpose, right? This is how I'm going to change the world. That is the purpose, right? I didn't hire and saying, hey, I will list and I will give you equity and you will make 20 crores. Because that is the wrong mindset to get into with somebody you're getting in. So the idea that someone may be, from a small town, someone may be a mid-manager struggling with confidence, who can discover herself through coaching, meaning, or to the hard days, that's what kept me going when numbers don't add up and plans don't unfold perfectly. That I'm making a difference through coaching and mentoring to people across levels. And when you get those thank you notes, there is no more reward more than that than another company sending me a check, right? Because when people send you thank you message about this really made my mind change, I can see things differently. It's a different level of joy. I'm not doing philanthropy, but that does matter, right? Yeah. So don't get me wrong, profit is essential. It's what sustains purpose. It's what gives it continuity. But I've learned that profit without purpose is hollow, and purpose without financial discipline is fragile, right? So you need both. One fuels the soul, other fuels the system. In my corporate world, success was defined by the balance sheet. Yeah. In my entrepreneurial world, it's defined by the balance of impact and integrity. And perhaps the biggest learning in this, when you chase meaning with the same passion you chase money, life rewards you with something richer than either, which is fulfillment.
That was crystal clear. I think I'm going to skip all the other questions around that because you answered it. So I'm going to shift a little bit, Anu. So do you think women face a different kind of identity crisis after a certain age compared to men? And could you share some thoughts on it? Putting on your HR hat again.
Yeah. So I think, for all the debates we've had in the past, the journey for a man or a woman is different. At work or as an entrepreneur. I think I found it more tougher as an entrepreneur than in the corporate world. Okay. In the corporate world, you have fancy policies, you actually have systems, you have training. They do, in spite of what's happening in the world, which I will not talk about, they yet take these things a lot more seriously, right? And good or bad, entrepreneurial world doesn't have any rules. So when I'm sitting in front of investors for funding, I was told I'm a late stage woman trying to get into this gig. I don't have an IIT background. I have a husband who earns. I have had a corporate gig. I made my money. How serious am I? Am I doing this for lifestyle reasons, or am I running a boutique firm? So the fact is that the questions which were asked of me in my pitches were very different than men. Yeah. Right? It started with a doubt whether this can really work for her. And I felt it more, and this is me, Malu, as you know, coming from a BFSI world. I have multiple friends and family in Ps and VCs, and I was aghast whether I'm going through this stuff, right? So I think the journey for women and men is very different, but I'm beginning to see a shift in women itself. For the longest time, a woman who's starting her or restarting her career was met with skepticism. Why now? Will she be able to do this, or will she be able to catch up? Isn't she too set in her ways? Is she very emotional? Those questions weren't about competence. They were reflecting conditioning of the world, right? And this includes women also, because they are also conditioned to believe women behave like that. But I think what's changing now is, I see this because in VS we have a big practice around this, is that women no longer are asking for permission to begin today. They're reclaiming their stories, their timelines, their voice. I mean, look at you. I mean, the different things that you have done, Malu. So you're a prime example of how, pivots can happen. And organizations are starting to see values in that. So, there's a lot of talk about second careers, for example, for women. So women go through their own stages of taking a break, coming back. And second career is not a comeback. It's a continuation of experience with a renewed purpose, right? So when a woman restarts after years of corporate life, of caregiving, she brings maturity, empathy, and a perspective that can't be taught in a classroom. And these are not gaps, they're chapters of wisdom in my view. So I see women in their 40s and 50s stepping into coaching, doing freelancing on a platform. They're doing leadership, they're doing entrepreneurship with lots of grace and confidence. In fact, one of our coaches was a senior banker who paused for family and now mentors young professionals with insights with no textbooks could even offer. And another I find who re-entered corporate life through leadership programs and coaching that we develop. So I think it's not yet mainstream, but I think women's journey are different, right? And it's not something which is going to change in a dramatic shift, but I think the shift is happening. I see more women in the workforce. I would only tell the women that the world is not going to change at the pace you may want to, but that doesn't mean you stop pushing the system. And so the effort continues.
Say you have the power to redesign a workplace to be more pivot friendly, especially for women 50 plus. What would that look like?
So I think going by my own experience, but as a 50 plus woman, I've kind of spoken about the experience that I had. So I think changing mindsets is one part of it, but what women can do on their own is that, I think a 50-year-old woman is actually very confident. I mean, if you look at the archetype, you've been there, you've done it all, you've faced goods and the bads in the workplace. So the confidence is usually much higher. You don't have anything dragging you back or holding back. Kids are much older, hopefully. Your caregiving responsibilities are probably more towards parents than your children. But that's kind of a burden you share, I would say, with your husband. So I think there's a little more freedom or liberation for a 50 plus woman. So it's time to take more risk and do things that you've been pining to do rather than taking a back seat. So I think you can come back with far more energy, far more gusto if you're working in a corporate and go into roles, projects, places that you haven't ventured. What you may be faced with is saying, hey, you're too old to get into it, right? And I would say that's where a little bit pushback and negotiation has to happen. And that can happen through networks you build, the conversations you have, and so forth, so on. If you're a woman in your 50s, God bless, it is a lot more energy. That's all I would tell you. But you have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
You have so much experience, right? Whether you've been a caregiver or you worked elsewhere, you can go and find yourself any other job too. So why not push the edge to its extreme? So for me, I think, as I said, I found a lot of liberation in that one. But I think 50s is all about reinvention in many ways. It's about resilience and it's about rediscovery.
We touched upon ageism a bit, so I'm going to ask you a favorite question. This is about, your take on ageism and retirement. Okay, the retirement age varies from country to country. A person who wants to work in a specific country may not be able to because of age restrictions, right? So what is your take on it? Should we have retirement age? Should you allow people to do it? I know we have the option of starting something on your own, but lots of people may not have the DNA to do it. They have their comfort zone, they have the expertise, and they would like to continue. So in such a situation, what do you think needs to be done, say from a government's perspective for policies or corporate's perspective in terms of execution? Because stats definitely show us that people live longer and birth rates are going down. So how do you leverage or take advantage of this pool of resources?
So I think it's a very timely question because the whole idea of retirement was designed for a world which doesn't exist anymore, in my view, right? That you retire and then you need to, go traveling. Like we have 4 parts: Gurukul and Grihast, then Vanaprastha, and then you become a sannyasi, right? So the traditional model where you work till 60 and then fade quietly into rest came from an era where lifespans were shorter. Yeah. Industries were linear, and retirement was the reward for endurance. But today people are living longer, learning faster, and wanting to contribute far beyond the age that policy once decided was their finishing line. Good. So do we need retirement? I suspect yes, but not as an end point, rather than as a transition point. I think we need to move from the idea of retiring from work to redesigning work at corporates. And at 50 or 60, most professionals, especially women, are not winding down as we talk. They're hitting their second peak. Their wisdom, networks, perspectives are immense assets. I sit on 5 boards and I work with a lot of people in their 70s and 80s. And the wisdom and the experience is absolutely incredible and invaluable. For companies, this means rethinking how they engage experience. Instead of seeing 50 plus employee as a cost, they should see them as knowledge multipliers, mentors, advisors, consultants. Imagine encore programs, roles that blend mentoring. And since I'm a mentoring platform, mentoring, governance, project-based work, we have a lot of people in this age group which actually are mentoring and coaching new CEOs, for example, right? They have seen down cycle, up cycle, they've seen politics, they've seen country issues. So they're able to say, okay, in 50s or 60s, this used to happen, right? For employees, it's also about reframing their purpose. The question isn't when should I retire, it's what will my next chapter look like. Correct. That might be a portfolio career, social impact work, or entrepreneurship. The idea is not to stop contributing, but to start contributing differently. And I think from a policy perspective for employees and what corporates can do is they have to adapt too. So they can have flexible retirement age or phased exits. They can have incentives for lifelong learning beyond 50. Like if you look at AI, right? I mean, my mother of 85-year-old has learned how to work with ChatGPT. She's way more active on social media than I am, right? So they are very adaptable. Third thing would be inclusion in health, insurance, reskilling program, and recognition of age diversity as a core pillar of inclusion. So, at VS, we are seeing this every day, where employees in their 50s take up digital coaching, board roles, second careers with renewed energy. They don't want a farewell, they want a fresh start. So should retirement exist? Yes, but let's retire the old meaning of retirement. Let's not make it a pivot. Let's make it a pivot, not a pause.
How do you increase the awareness? We're building a platform called Renew. The objective is to look for jobs for 50 plus, have events, skilling, etc. But then when you talk to companies, you realize that the concept of giving some contract assignments or specific assignments to these people doesn't even exist. It doesn't exist, or they refuse to accept it, right? So the awareness that there is a gold mine out here seems to be less as compared to what it should be. So how do you go about telling the companies or increasing awareness around the space?
That's part of the challenge, but it is also the opportunity. So as I shared with you, all my board roles, I probably think I'm skewing their age because I'm in my early 50s and everybody else is in their 70s. So I haven't found a board which is made up of 20 or 30-year-olds, because the definition of the board is you bring wisdom and experience.
Yeah.
So I actually find a lot of them also doing plural roles of advisors and contributing to companies, again, from a governance perspective or network perspective or cross-border issues and stuff like that. The truth is, companies rarely wake up one morning and say, let's redesign for 50 plus or 60 plus, right? It's a journey. When it start in boardrooms or CXO levels, it starts in conversations like these with data, stories, and lived experiences. So our first job is to make the invisible visible, right? And a couple of places at VS, we also start by showing organization what they're losing, not out of sympathy, but out of strategy. So we share evidence, the productivity gains from intergenerational teams, the emotional intelligence of senior people coming in, and a measurable impact of mentorship and continuity, right? Let's look at families, Malu. We have grandparents, we have older parents. Soon you and I will become grandparents at some point of time. There is so much for us to share from our experience. It's for our children to accept parts of it or reject entirely. But I will share nevertheless. I remember once arguing with my daughter, and it was some emotional topic, and she said, Mama, give me advice when it's solicited. I said, no, that is my Janam Siddha Adhikar to give you guidance and advice of my birthright. It's for you to decide if this is relevant or not relevant. And as we had that conversation, what I was telling her became very apparent was very helpful, because she doesn't know the risks of certain decisions, but the overconfidence of the generation in their 20s or 30s can kill them too and take them off the cliff. So I think awareness is a continue, right? The fact that you and I even having this conversation today, to me, is a move forward. The fact that we're talking about ageism, the fact that we are investing in skilling, the fact that we have boards is a movement. Having said that, I also believe that we as leaders have to decide when our time is up, and we need to place to a younger generation to come in with fresh ideas, with new vigor, doing things differently, because they are the leadership of the future. Else you could have problems in certain countries where they are sitting with the whole burden of social securities and all those old policies. So if you look at some of the more developed market, this is a problem because they've over-invested in this agenda. So there's a balance. So the developed markets, so Japan is over-invested in this agenda, emerging markets are under-invested in this agenda. And I think the balance is somewhere in between. Otherwise, you'll have a exodus of youngsters in certain countries. So for the companies, I think once the awareness begins, timing becomes critical. So you don't just start this conversation when a company is hiring or restructuring. You start it when they're rethinking culture, inclusion, future readiness. That's when they're open to new ideas, and when data is combined with empathy, it can shift perspective. So when we talk to organizations, we should focus on 3 levers, in my view. One is policy, and not just gender, ethnicity, but simple actions like extending learning budgets, flexible contracts, midlife career coaching can make a huge difference. Second is pilot program. Instead of waiting for a sweeping change, we co-create small pilot of second peak leadership, return to influence, mentorship programs. We outline roles where we need wisdoms of the past. So if you need to break the rules, you need a youngsters. But when you need risk or governance, you need somebody to come with wisdom. Otherwise, you may actually be having different consequence. Third thing could be around storytelling. We share stories of people who've reinvented themselves, like founders, mentors, and executives. Ultimately, the shift happens when companies stop seeing this as a social cause and start seeing this as a business advantage. So a 50-year-old person or a 60-year-old person can bring stability. They can bring a context, they can bring clarity that can balance the risk and the risk appetite of the younger teams. And that's not charity, that's strategy. So I truly believe that the next age of inclusion can be focused on age. We've moved from gender to generation, and it's time that we celebrate the power of experience.
On a lighter note, Anu, quick fire round. The HR habit you just cannot shake off. Is there any?
There's so many. That's what I'm thinking. It's talk to your manager. It's not my problem.
Okay. The weirdest feedback you've ever received in your corporate life?
In my corporate life, I was going to talk about entrepreneurship life.
Or you can say both. One for each.
Yeah. So corporate life was, are you serious about coming back from maternity? Was it a question or a feedback? I don't know. And in entrepreneurship, it was like, why do you want to do this? Are you sure? You're in your 50s, you have a husband who earns and you need your money. So why do you want to do this? I don't know, it's a feedback, but it was just a incisive comments that I was doing.
If you could put a billboard in every office lobby, what would it say to women over 50?
Keep calm and carry on.
Keep calm and carry on. If you had to describe your current life as a playlist, what's the first song on it?
It will be another one. Moja Moja.
Moja Moja, okay. Okay, for someone listening who feels that they've lost their purpose, what's the very first step that they should take to find their footing again?
I think about what will make you get up in the morning and run to something. What is it that makes you want to get out of bed next day in the morning? And it could be as simple as doing yoga or getting your juice, but that's fine. What is it that excites you? What is it that energizes you? I mean, it's a conversation I have with our, older parents as well, actually.
Okay, and finally, what's your next reset? Is there a third act that you've already been dreaming about?
Oh my God, Malu, I'm like, if I get
Tons
through
of them.
this. So my third reset actually would be, it's not a reset. I'm doing my third book actually. So I really enjoy writing. In some way it's a reset. So I think yes, as a baby, he's now become a little older, and I have a fabulous bunch of people who work here. So I now have a little more time to do what I really love to do, which is writing.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, Anu, thank you so much for generously sharing your insights on everything from pivoting to ageism to gender parity. Very incredibly informative and inspiring conversation, and I truly appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Malu. Lovely being here.
Thank you. And for those listening and wondering if it's too late to start again, you have lessons to learn from Anuranjita's journey. Whether you're 25 or 55, there's always room to reset, rebuild, and rediscover your purpose.